evening and welcome to the Left, Right and Centre. Tonight, major developments in the world of cricket management with the Supreme Court coming down heavily on the BCCI's president-in-exile, N Srinivasan, asking how he could also be involved in a franchise of the IPL. Nikhil Naz will have all that in the show in just a couple of minutes. But also on the show tonight, the Times of India revokes its invitation to Tarun Tejpal to attend a Lit Fest after uproar on social media. Did they buckle under pressure? Should they have invited someone facing trial for serious charges and currently out on bail in the first place? And from the Lit Fest, we shall turn our attention to the SAARC summit that's going to be held in Kathmandu this week. Will India and Pakistan meet on the sidelines? The big question over there. My colleague Nidhi Razdan will join us live from Nepal. And now, of course, as we said, the big development in cricket management. Nikhil Naz, it's over to you.
Thanks a lot for that, Maya. Of course, our top story of the day. If you own an IPL team and an official of that team is guilty of indulging in illegal activities, how can you be given a clean chit? That's the crux of what the Supreme Court told BCCI president-in-exile, Mr N Srinivasan today. Another thing that is pretty clear after the hearing today is that the Supreme Court seems to have taken a very dim view of the BCCI and the way it operates. My colleague Rika Roy has more.
N Srinivasan might have been expecting a favourable observation from the Supreme Court as far as his petition to be reinstated as BCCI president is concerned, but he was in for a big surprise. The Supreme Court told Srinivasan that he was assuming that he had been given a clean chit. The Apex Court reminded Srinivasan that one of the employees of his team, namely his son-in-law Gurunath Mayappan, was involved in betting. In fact, the Apex Court asked Srini that in a scenario like this, should he be serving the BCCI at all? The top court making it abundantly clear that Srinivasan cannot assume that he is free to demand anything just because the Mudgal report found him not guilty of illegal betting or disrupting the probe. Interestingly, the court chose to focus on Srinivasan's conflict of interest, even though this was not part of the Mudgal panel's investigation. The court observed the ownership of CSK by India Cements, a company owned by Srinivasan, raises conflict of interest. According to the top court, the president of the BCCI has to run the show. But you have a team, which raises questions. It can't be wished away. The court in fact made a scathing criticism of the BCCI, calling it a mutual benefit society. So the Supreme Court coming down rather heavily on both Srinivasan and the BCCI. Also saying that the game of cricket is being killed. If these observations are anything to go by, the coming days are not going to be very comfortable for the richest cricket body in the world or its president in exile.
कोर्ट का उस पर क्या ऑब्जर्वेशन रहता है देखिए, कल फाइनल वर्डिक्ट आने के बाद पता चलेगा, लेकिन इतना जरूर पता है कि एक जो भी ऑर्डर आएगा ये लैंडमार्क जजमेंट होगा और क्रिकेट के हित में, बीसीसीआई के हित में और आने वाले जो जनरेशन है जो गंदे कामों की तरफ ज्यादा उनका ध्यान रहता है खेल के प्रति, उन लोगों के लिए एक कड़ा सबक होगा.
Based on Mukul Mudgal panel's report, the lawyers are asking for the termination of Chennai Super Kings, which is why Justice T.S. Thakur has asked the petitioners' lawyers to do their homework better and come back with their arguments when the hearing resumes at 2 p.m. on Tuesday. In New Delhi with A. Vaidyanathan, this is Rika Roy for NDTV.
For more on this story, I'm now joined by our senior sports journalist V. Krishnaswamy in the studio. Also joining me live from Ahmedabad is former first-class cricketer in Shishir Hatangadi and former cricket commentator Kishore Bhimani joins us from Kolkata. I'll start with you, Shishir. I don't know how good Mr. Srinivasan was as a cricketer in his heydays, but his defence was immaculate all this while that the IPL case was heard in the Supreme Court. However, today, with the Supreme Court bringing that conflict of interest issue, would you say this was a googly that Mr. Srinivasan was ill prepared for?
Yeah, usually googlies are balls that you don't pick, and you obviously it creates a hesitancy in your footwork. I mean, it was as good as that. One wouldn't have expected that the Apex Court to take that line, but the fact that they did means now that there is a little more explaining to do than whatever has been put down, in the terms of reference of the Mudgal Commission report.
Mr. Bhimani, you described it as what? A full toss that he was hoping for? All he got was a bouncer, would you say?
Yeah, well, no, he was expecting a full toss which he would put away. But obviously his defense was not as good as it should be, so it just broke his stumps. You see, basically the fact is that he was not expecting this conflict of interest, and that is what must have bamboozled him. He was expecting to be told by the court that his personal conduct was above board, everybody else, whatever the problems were with Raj Kundra, with Mayappan, with whoever else it was, that was bad, but he was okay. He was going around telling everyone, I have done nothing wrong. And the court pointed out what he had done wrong. 3 things. Conflict of interest in changing the law of the IPL to own a team, in spite of being a president.
Right.
Number 2, knowing about his son-in-law, and number 3, covering up for his son-in-law and saying he was not a principal owner. Basically, that's it.
Okay, Krishnaswamy, to you, just to play the devil's advocate, and this is what the defense is going to say when the hearing resumes. No, I'm playing the devil.
Defend the indefensible right now.
No, I'm playing the devil's advocate.
Okay.
You're free to express your opinion.
Thank you, thank you.
The BCCI would argue that you can't be guilty by association. Yes, Gurunath Mayappan could have been a team official. Yes, he was found guilty of illegal betting, but Mr. Srinivasan had nothing to do with it. That would be their defense, wouldn't it?
Certainly, I mean, that's the line that the lawyers or the defense team for Srinivasan has been taking. But very clearly, what they didn't expect to know was this conflict of interest. I mean, the conflict of interest is something which has been talked about a lot, which actually has really never come up, even when we've been discussing the Mudgal Committee report.
Right.
So far, he's been saying, yes, I mean, perfectly justified in saying this. I mean, a rich father's son might run over somebody, but that doesn't mean the father has to be put into jail for that. The son is, kind of, has made a mistake. But so similarly, I think guilty by association, that wouldn't have been fair on him. But again, if he knew even an iota, I mean, that's very difficult to believe that there was this man who was his son-in-law, who was part of all the meetings. There he was raising the paddle, and every time the paddle went up, it went by a couple of $100,000. I mean, that's not, kind of small amount of money.
Correct.
I mean, it is, so obviously, this was a man who was very much in the know, and he had to be much, much more than an enthusiast. Yes, he was also an enthusiast, but then so is everybody else in this country of 1.2 billion people. Everybody is a cricket enthusiast here, but we don't get to go around on the field, put their arm around the captain, or exchange team sheets.
Okay,
so,
to Mr. Bhimani now, as we are arguing, this could be a defense that could be offered by the BCCI, saying that, listen, Mayappan may have done this, but Mr. Srinivasan didn't. He's clean on that front. However, there's another thing that the court pointed out today, the conflict of interest we were talking about. It's manifold, not just one. The other is, if you are the BCCI president, and this the court has said in no uncertain terms, that if you are the BCCI president, how will you then take action against CSK? Isn't that another major thing that the BCCI needs to be worried about?
Sure it is, Nikhil, but the fact remains that the law that we are talking about a court of law, the apex court in the country, and they have to accept the fact that the law had been changed. Now, if the law, in the changed law, he's allowed to own a team. Now, I think the guilt lies not by association. I'd just like to add to what Mr. Krishnaswamy was saying, just a small addition, that it's not just guilt by association. He was guilty of, after the crime, saying that he has nothing to do with the team. He has misled us all, misled the cricketing public, misled the investigating authority by saying he was just an enthusiast. Now, this is wrong, because he was a team principal.
Okay.
If he was a team principal, his son-in-law, and a member of the vice president of the India Cements Company, come on, he wouldn't know about it, which means he has told a lie. This is the whole point.
Okay, Shishir, to you, the cynics would say that we could argue as much as we want in television studios trying to prove that there was a conflict of interest that does exist, but in the court of law, it doesn't hold. The conflict of interest doesn't come under the Indian Penal Code or the Societies Act or whatever you have. So then, at the end of the day, how do you find Mr. Srinivasan guilty of anything?
Well, to answer your question, the conflict of interest doesn't hold in a court of law. It doesn't hold because the BCCI has revised that clause. But it does hold when you are sitting in a position and also involved with a team that you have to take a decision on in terms of their ability to go on playing in the IPL because of because of the Rule 11.3c, which really clearly states that if any individual or a management person or a principal is involved in passing information, then that team may be debarred. So obviously that's where the conflict of interest comes in. It's not so much that the conflict of interest, everybody knew about it. I think every franchisee knows about it. Okay. They haven't raised a question on that. It's a cozy club, as Mr. Bhimani would say, and there are franchisees who are well and truly aware of who owns what team, and they're entitled to raise an objection, but they haven't done it in the past 7 years. So where is the question of us discussing that? The problem lies in taking a decision on a team that is affected by information being passed and things like that. And that's where I think there is a dichotomy in the way you look at two teams. One is the Rajasthan Royals and the Chennai Super Kings. And that is where I think the concern lies in the minds of the people sitting in the apex court. They're worried that this might in a way make you favor a certain team and not favor the other team. And rightly so, they've made a point, but the bigger danger and the bigger shame is that the end of first day opinion and the recommendation, observation of the apex court tells you really that this is years of rubble being brushed under the carpet. This is not about yesterday or last year or 2 years.
Correct.
This is about the system being flawed. And I think every cricket lover should be holding his head in shame that an apex court of the country has such observations about the richest cricket board in the world.
Okay, that is exactly what I was trying to get at. Technicalities aside, let's take a look at the bigger picture right now. The Supreme Court has said, and I quote, they say BCCI has become a mutual benefit society. To you, Mr. Krishnaswamy, they've just fallen short of calling it a cozy club, in other words.
Well, I think it's just a kind of an euphemism, they could have well called it a cozy club. What I'm actually worried about is that there are actually no lines. If you can say the lines are either blurred or nothing exists between the BCCI and IPL. The officials you find in the IPL are also officials that you find in BCCI and vice versa. So very clearly, one will not harm the other, because you certainly have to kind of go along with each other, and then you enjoy the benefits of it, but you don't talk about what is not right about it. Okay. So very clearly, it is indeed a mutual benefit society, very, very correctly put by the apex.
Okay, to Mr. Bhimani and Shishir makes a very valid point. Should every cricket fan now hang his head in shame? Because at the end of the day, this is another observation by the Supreme Court. They've asked Mr. Srinivasan, do you want to preside over the liquidation of the game? In other words, saying that the sport is dying, do something about it. Doesn't look like it is going to have any effect on the BCCI going by their past record, but it's a day that every cricket fan should hang his head in shame.
Well, I think Shishir put it very nicely, but where is the question of whether we should do it? We've been hanging our head down in shame for the last few months, since it started, since the cozy clubs continued to function, since all these people gathered ranks around him and said we'll support him till the very end. I think every day our another millimeter or 2 millimeters our faces fell, and we hung our heads down in shame to the level until that it was quite intolerable. There is absolutely no way out. In a sense of, if he had any sense of honor, ethics, morality, justice, he would say, okay, let me get out of this. But he is just going to find ways of asking his lawyer to make a plea for him. Yes, all that is past. Now let us talk of the future, and I'm there. And what is, Nikhil, do we realize one thing? There's not a word from any of the senior board officials. Nothing.
No wonder.
The East, which should hold which create the president.
Right, no wonder the Supreme Court has called it a mutual benefit society. Unfortunately, completely out of time, Mr. Shishir Hattangadi, Kishore Bhimani and V. Krishnaswamy, thanks so much for joining us. Of course, the next hearing is tomorrow, and we'll wait and see what other observations the Supreme Court